Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as our program will resume shortly. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the break. Now please welcome Mr. Roger Greenwell, Director, Enterprise Integration and Innovation Center.
Good morning. How's everybody doing today? So hopefully you found the overall conference valuable, and certainly hopefully forecast to industry here today will be valuable for you as well. A little bit about me. Was previously the risk management executive, and I'm actually still serving in that role. I've been asked to take on responsibility for the Enterprise Integration and Innovation Center. Many of you have already heard, about our reorganization. But I want to talk for just a second, what is integration? When you look at integration, it's combining into the whole, the intermixing. When you look at innovation, what is innovation? One of the definitions I looked at was the practical implementation of ideas leading to new goods and services or improvements in goods and services. And I think that's really a lot of why our center was actually established, to actually bring together and look at whether it's technologies, whether it's process improvements, whether it's changes in how we operate. General Skinner talked this morning for a few minutes about how we actually utilize our existing tools in a more robust fashion across the entirety of all of our portfolios. And I think that's a lot of what my center and the team that is assembled to really be able to do, to work across all of our great leaders. I think the center leaders that have been put in place with Don and Sharon and Jason, a fantastic crew. I am looking so forward to the four of us working together to drive change. And of course, with all of our other supporting organizations, and as well, Admiral Hurley with the JSP. So that's really, again, a little bit about how we're actually organized and how, again, I see the role of the Enterprise Integration Innovation Center actually moving. If we can go to the next slide, please. Just a little bit about some of the functions and missions that we have. I don't have any specific opportunities to talk about this morning, but I want to give you a little bit idea of kind of, what the organization is doing and some of those key focus areas as we look across the different directorates that make up the EIIC. So I'm also dual-headed as the agency CIO, so I'm still carrying that responsibility. And it's good because I can help, again, drive processes, tools, technologies, capabilities, again, across the entirety of what we as DISA are trying to achieve. From a CIO's perspective, we're responsible, again, for all the statutory activities for which DISA has a responsibility for, things like Section 508, records management, FISMA, of course. One of the big things that we're working with is commodity IT management. There's been a lot of discussion around the 4ENO concept and what Don Means and his team are trying to do. But as a customer from a DISA reaching out and leveraging the Fourth Estate Network Optimization team, I'm responsible for making sure that we DISA, our employees are getting the services we need from the Fourth Estate organization. One of the big focuses I've got in the CIO organization right now, candidly, is around software licenses and inventory. We've spent some time over this last year working with a couple of vendors looking at how we're tracking licenses, how we're maintaining our inventory of those. So that is a big focus for us going into this next year. How do we actually maintain that inventory? And of course, every product out there does licensing a little bit different. So that's a key area of focus for us. The emerging technologies area led by Steve Wallace. Steve is now also our Chief Technology Officer. I think many of you have already heard that. A lot of that was done to bring in the enterprise architecture function in and have a person that's really focused on building that enterprise architecture and what does it mean. If you have an enterprise architecture on paper and you have it up on a shelf, that doesn't buy you anything. So Steve and his team are actually chartered now to really help build that enterprise architecture and truly, again, across the DISA enterprise. As we think about development and maintenance of technical standards, one of the reorganization elements was to bring all of the team that was doing tactical data standards, mill messaging standards, bringing all of those individuals together as well, because again, that's a broader department function. Enterprise engineering and governance. This team was originally part of our operations portfolio under Don. They were moved over under EIIC to really take, again, enterprise-wide look at things. As we think about problem and incident management, as we think about end-to-end performance, how are we actually measuring end-to-end performance when we, think about from, the user's desktop endpoint all the way up to whether it's an on-prem compute or in the cloud. It really stems the entire portfolio of everything that DISA does. So Raj Shah is our senior leader in that area. One of the big things we're looking in this portfolio is around automation. We have got to automate the way that we do business. whether it's the way that we establish capabilities inside of the hosting center, whether it's automation from security orchestration and automated response. How do we take advantage of data and be able to automate response and drive automation both in networking, at the host layer, et cetera? Our Chief Data Officer, this is a new role. I think it's been mentioned pretty well. Caroline Kaharski is the deputy of that organization right now. Again, the CDO focus is to drive the use of data, both for business outcomes as well as for operational outcomes. This is a relatively new organization that's being stood up here as part of our reorg, or restructuring, I should say. But they're going to be so critical. When we look at the lines of effort that General Skinner has established for the agency, we recognize that use of data as the center of gravity is so very important to everything that we are going to be working to accomplish. And then the last area is actually risk management, which is also my prior role, which I'm still doing. So it's great to still be involved in that. I will still probably continue to be involved in that, but there will be someone eventually coming in to help take some of the reins and take some of the load off as we work to stand up the new center and, again, bring capability across the entire organization. This team is responsible for conducting risk analysis of systems and networks. Many of you from the cloud perspective know that we work with FedRAMP and issue the DoD provisional authorizations for the use of cloud computing. Certainly working with the JWCC team under Sharon as we get ready for what comes about there. Development of STIGs, Security Technical Implementation Guides, and Security Requirement Guides to, again, try to drive across the enterprise how we can better secure the use of technology, and then also manage an insider threat. One of the big focuses there, and you heard this from General Skinner, was talking about how do we, I'm going to use the word reform, how we do authorizations. How do we get to a point of doing continuous authorizations? And we're seeing different organizations do this differently across the department. It's a united focus. I mean, every authorized, key CISO authorizing official out there is really, all in for trying to figure out how do we reform how we do RMF. If you think back to the old days, we had the DITS cap, and then we moved to the DI cap, and then we moved to the RMF. And we moved, back in the old day, we had this much paper to make an authorization. Then we moved to this much paper. RMF, we still got a lot of paper. We're still reliant too much on a human documenting something and not taking advantage of technology to actually inform the controls. So that is a very big focus for us. It is important, and from my perspective, you've heard General Skinner talk about it. I mean, there's probably not a week goes by that I don't get a couple little, I'll use the term zings. Hey, Roger, Jason, what are you guys doing about this? So we are, both united because, again, I've got the process within DISA. And in Jason's portfolio under Brian Herman, they've got the tools that'll go along with this. So again, we have to look at, how do we reform the process and actually look at the tools that go along with this. So that, at a high level, is what my organization is focused on. I think I may have a minute or two for some questions, and then I'd like to bring Steve Wallace up here, who is our CTO, to really talk about what's on that tech watch list. So I'll pause if there's questions.
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, great. So Steve, over to you.
Is this, here we go. Thank you, Roger. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so about this is the third year that we've published our tech watch list. It's actually worked out pretty well. It was originally developed for Forecast to Industry so that we could share with you in industry the topics and ideas that we were looking at as we were standing up the Emerging Technology Group. In the past year, though, we actually started using this more broadly to communicate with mission partners and actually internally as well to drive the workforce and sort of unite the workforce, if you will, behind it. So going to highlight a few of the changes this year. It's the same format as we had last year, the monitor, plan, prototype, and deploy. Going to highlight a couple of the changes for this year and talk about some of the new things and where some other things have moved. So along the outside there, the data fabric side, realizing the fact that we're increasingly taking or making use of cloud, whether it's on-prem, off-prem, what have you, interested in the concept behind data fabric and looking at the potential for a common data fabric that would span across all of them. So really just looking to see what's going on there. The encrypted traffic analysis was on here last year. Still very interested in that space. We didn't see a lot come from that last year, but something that we're still certainly monitoring. I guess we can't give a single brief, though, without talking about 5G. So still continuing to monitor what's going on with 5G, watching the standards develop. Specifically, two things in the standard continue to interest us. The network slicing capabilities to create effectively a virtual private network using slicing within the standard, and then peer-to-peer functionality, which I don't think is quite in the ratified standard yet, but I think it's proposed. Moving into the planning edge there, edge computing is increasingly interesting. I think it was Admiral Chase yesterday when we spoke to the press, talked about the need and the ability to process data close to where it's generated before synchronizing it back, not attempting to backhaul as much data as generated and process it centrally. Edge computing's been around for some time now, and there's a renewed push into that space. Telepresence, I'll touch on that a little bit. EM's conference room in DISA's headquarters right now is frankly in pieces as we are pulling in a number of components from different vendors, looking at how, as the department has adopted DoD 365J, how we can integrate our conference rooms more effectively. So we're actively looking for technology to make the interaction between the workforce who is remote as well as in person better, less friction filled, that kind of thing. We've all been on the other end of the phone when there's a conference going on in a room and you hear that people are writing on a whiteboard, or maybe you can catch it out of the corner of the camera, but things like the whiteboard cameras, that remove the person doing the drawing and enhance the image, directional microphones, directional cameras, those kinds of things are the type of things that we're looking for there. Next generation mobile management. There was an RFI that went out not too long ago. You'll see some more action from the agency in that respect as we figure out, again, as the workforce is becoming more mobile, where we want to go with that. Quantum resistant cryptography. This one was actually in the monitor phase last year as we were watching what NIST did with their down select to the quantum algorithms that they're going to endorse. So that has moved forward, and with that, we are moving forward with a couple of projects and interested in hearing from industry what you all are doing around quantum-resistant algorithms. Zero Trust, I'm going to leave that one alone right now because we're going to talk about in a second one of the pieces that we've built with that Zero Trust strategy. And the reason why it's actually still here is because even though, okay, I'll say it, Thunderdome, because we've talked about it all week, right? So, excuse me. So with Thunderdome, that is not the end-all be-all of our Zero Trust strategy. It is a component of the Zero Trust strategy and to help move us into that mindset. But Zero Trust will still very much be a component moving forward. In fact, the folks in the Cyber Directorate are working on the next V2 version of the Zero Trust architecture. Touch on reverse browser isolation real quick. This is one that we added, I think last year. We were monitoring, we're moving it into planning and quickly into prototyping before long. This builds on the work that we did with our cloud-based internet isolation. about 2 years ago, where it was a trusted workstation or trusted endpoint talking to untrusted data on the internet. This basically flips that, and it is untrusted machines or workstations talking to trusted data sources, really thinking through how can we create that separation. We had the web application firewalls, that kind of thing. Let's go next generation. Let's look beyond what we were doing with just the WAFs. Talked about Thunderdome just a little bit, but we are extremely excited and encouraged by the response that we've seen from industry around Thunderdome. This is a prototype that we're moving into. We're really trying to push some limits here. So Thunderdome is very important to the agency and the department as a whole. Even as I mentioned, Thunderdome doesn't fill all of those gaps. So we'll continue to build things out and look for other opportunities to employ a lot of those concepts. Infrastructure as code. So our folks in the Hosting and Compute Center, previously the CCPO team, they launched into a prototype this year, this past year, and with an infrastructure as code prototype that was highly successful. But it really lays the groundwork for additional things that we can do in terms of laying down infrastructure in a repeatable way. So some really interesting things have come out of that, and things that we're pretty excited about there. There was a lot of talk this week about RPA. When we talk about our automation, RPA is just one component of that. Roger talked about how important automation is, and it spans the gamut. It touches every portion of the agency, no matter whether we're talking about the more technical sides, in the hosting area or the transport side, or even our financial systems and those kinds of things. So Raj Shah's team is heavily engaged to try to orchestrate that across the agency, and pretty excited to see where that goes. I'll hit on two more things and try to take a minute for questions here. Actually, I'll hit on three real quick. Breach and attack simulation. So we're really interested in this space, have been actually for some time. We've dabbled in it. We've worked with our folks in JFHQ Doden on it. But this is really, Colonel Lytle, if anybody remembers Colonel Lytle, he always had the saying, we have vendor in depth, right? So that's not a slight at anyone. But oftentimes we deploy capabilities and we wait to see to ensure that they defend our networks and our data properly. What this category of product does for us is, let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's actually simulate some breaches and some attacks, and let's make sure that the things, the white papers that we implemented capabilities on, and the Visio drawings and what have you, actually hold up in a real actual scenario there, and it'll help us better tune our systems, make sure that things don't drift. Because as good as a capability can be, it's only as good as it's actually implemented. So really interested to see what happens in that space. JFHQ Doden is also pushing hard into that area. ICAM, we heard the director talk about what we want to do beyond the Common Access Card. So what we're really looking for here is diversity in credentials. So we've had the Common Access Card for 15-ish years. There's, when we did the CVR environment, we were, one of the side effects is we were able to prove out the validity of username, password, and an MFA component. And then also other physical tokens, biometrics, these kinds of things. That's C, that's the credential portion of ICAM. You're going to see a heavy focus on that as we move forward. In the past year as well, we've launched the global identity system, and we already had our existing enterprise ICAM program, so we've worked to combine those architectures, and the teams are working hard to move us forward there. Last thing I'll touch on is the what we call CAIM, or the Cyber Asset Inventory Management Program. That was a partnership that we did with Defense Innovation Unit, DIU. There's Johnson right there. So we worked with DIU on that one, and the idea there, to be frank, when we started down that road, it was really, we've got to get an inventory of all the things that the devices and systems that we have out there. And I thought we were going to end up with a network scanner, and that would have been fine, and that was pretty interesting. What we ended up with there was actually a product that goes and plugs into all of the other infrastructure that we already have, and all of the systems, the repositories that we already have, and then does the comparative analysis and looks for gray space, looks for things that, well, why does something appear in my Active Directory yet it doesn't appear in my antivirus product? So really excited as we start to deploy that. We're working with our folks at the joint service provider to help us move that one forward. So I know we're a little short on time, so I'll stop there, but available to chat, and I didn't know if we had any questions back there. Boy, you guys are lively.
We have no questions at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, a reminder, if you do have questions, please send it in to...
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Please, everyone, welcome Mr. Llewellyn Means, Director, Operations and Infrastructure Center.
That was pretty good. She actually went full Llewellyn on y'all. I go by Don. So I am the Center Director for the Operations and Infrastructure Center. We have the slides up. You can go to the next slide. So you've heard General Skinner talk extensively about the criticality of the partnership with industry, leveraging data as a center of gravity, modernizing command and control, and the imperative there. Everything that's fielded has to be operated, right? And so we've got touch points within my center to make sure that we've got connectivity to the customer, that we are able to command and control things that have been fielded, that we're able to manage things like incident, change, and problems. And so we have 4 focus areas in the center. They're down in the bottom left-hand corner. Perfect operations, it's not an end state, it's a verb. It acknowledges the amount of work that we put in this incredible, robust operational environment. However, there is still work to be done. We can always get better. It implies continuous improvement. And I think, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, that right now I can use industry's help on where we can find those areas to improve with the things that we've already fielded. The second focus area is achieving program balance. Often, we field things without kind of a clear lifecycle sustainment plan, and ultimately that ends up impacting the customer experience. We have something that's fielded that we're unable to sustain. And so that's what that focus area is primarily about. Ultimately, though, it is about the workforce and the employees. We need to make sure that we have all of our employees with the right skills in the right place at the right time so that they can move and achieve the velocity of action to win that you've heard about over the last couple days at TechNet and in other venues where you've seen General Skinner talk about his strategic objectives. And then the last piece is evolving our capabilities. A lot of times we've iterated over and over. At some point we need to rethink the way that we're doing things, particularly in a relevant operational environment, again, to make sure that we're improving the customer experience. How can we create a customer experience that's more like the experience that you have at home as opposed to what General Skinner described as a soul-crushing logon experience? How do we get there from here, and how do we lay in the plan to deliver those types of capabilities? Ultimately, it is about delivering next-generation warfighting capabilities, not just for the guys in the foxhole and guys and gals in the foxhole, but also for the people in the cube, the people that are overseas. How do we deliver and get to that next generation, and then be able to operate in a way that's seamless and more conducive to a productive environment? I'll go to the next slide. So I've got in the center 3 directorates. I've got the Cyberspace Operations Directorate. Mr. Joe Wassel leads that. It includes all of the field offices. We've got touch points with the commands to make sure that for the warfighter, we're getting that unvarnished feedback to understand what the requirements are so that we can surge to fix and get after it. Also within that directorate, we have things like supply chain risk management, mission assurance, We also have operational support pieces, whether it's transport, whether it's within EcoC2, which is now in Ms. Woods' center, and she'll talk about that, to make sure that when ultimately IT does fail, we've got the operational mechanisms to close that gap quickly. Moving down to the bottom, we've got transport services. That's under Mr. Chris Pajkowski. Phenomenal group there. You heard in the fireside chat the talk about the delivery capability to the Mercy. That was Chris Pajkowski's group, making sure that we're able to have a ubiquitous network to get access to the data no matter where you are, to be able to drive mission success. And then we have the Endpoint Services and Customer Support Directorate. Essentially in that directorate, depending on who you are, depending on the classification, you get one of the endpoint services there, from special access IT and presidential to Fourth Estate. You've heard about Fourth Estate network optimization, the bold initiative to create one environment for the DAFAs, one NIPR, one SIPR, raising the floor for security, increasing mobility and usability for the network, and then providing a platform for further innovation, quite frankly. So that's kind of the construct for the directorate. We're hyper-focused on C2, as you might imagine, and our ability to not only deliver that capability to make sure that we understand what's happening in our environment to keep it protected, secure, and working. Next slide. So from a portfolio perspective, operations is difficult to depict here, right? Because it doesn't matter whether it's applications, it doesn't matter whether it's 4E, operations will have touch points. And so we really are the foundation of the delivery of things, even like Thunderdome. You know, if Chris doesn't deliver a transport solution that enables things like SD-WAN, some of the future capabilities will not be achievable. And so really we're cross-cutting across all the portfolios in that regard, and working with Jason, anything that's going to be operationally fielded will go through a review. It already goes through a review with our Net Readiness Review Board, but we're elevating that to my level to make sure that we have an understanding of the operational risk as well as the operational risk, so that we, going forward, not to be risk adverse, but to be risk managed and risk aware from an operational standpoint of what we're putting in the field, ultimately about the customer experience and making sure that if we're fielding something that's high risk, we know that it's a capability that has to be out there, and we're able to pivot from there to make it more stable and less fragile, for example. Next slide. And so that's really it for operations. I don't have major offerings for forecast industry, but I do have industry asks, right? I did mention a little bit about things that are fielded. Right now, I could use help with how do we optimize what we have out there? You know, what have we bought that we're not using to its full potential? How can you help me expose the capabilities that are already out there to help us be more proactive, more preventative, to provide a seamless customer experience for not only the folks in the foxhole, for the folks in the cube as well? What do we need to do to lean forward to get to early discernment and early action? Again, with those capabilities, I've brought Dr. Serena Chan up to lead the directorate as our senior technical advisor, to pull the technical thread to understand, you know, what's missing. You know, what data do we have that we're not using to its full extent? What data do we need? How do we expose it? How do we change that data into information so we can take decisive action? The other ask is on supply chain risk management. Help us with your pedigree. When you deliver capability, lay it out for us so that we don't have to go through hoops to understand what is the risk that we're taking with particular acquisition, with a particular delivery. And the last thing is, ultimately, you know, help me improve the customer experience. You know, if we're doing something stupid operationally, give me the unvarnished feedback so that we can create something that is more like you have at home. You know, we do updates at home on our phones, on our networks. It's relatively seamless. So what you'll find is that our ops team will be taking visits to understand, how do you work in your ops center? How do you manage change? You know, I don't have to buy 8 more widgets. I want to know when a widget is going to fail so I can replace it ahead of time. So that's kind of the thought process in operations. There's a lot going on. There's obviously a lot of touch points with the other centers. I'm extremely excited with the way forward. But industry as an ongoing partner to help us understand where we're short and where we can improve is where I'm really looking for the help. And so with that quick overview, I'll pause for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Means. There are no questions at this time.
Fantastic. You guys are easy. Thanks.
Please welcome Ms. Sharon Woods, Acting Director, Hosting and Compute Center.
All right, is this on? Great. Well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you today. No offense to Dawn and Jason and Roger, but the HAC is the fun center, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about that. And I have Tony Purvis here, key leader in the center, and he'll share with you some of the specific opportunities that we have. So next slide, please. All right, so we are the hackers. And so what do we mean by that? Historically, hackers were testers. They went in to find holes, solve problems, and that's what we're all about. We're about speed. We have a critical mission for the department. It's foundational to a lot of the initiatives that the Secretary of Defense is getting after, and so we're here to solve problems, we're here to be creative, and we need your partnership to do that. We do not have all of the answers. Our mission is to empower the warfighter to execute at the speed of mission. That's it. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but it doesn't say use cloud to empower the warfighter, use data centers to empower the warfighter. Our vision is hosting and compute. And so there are a number of ways to get after that challenge, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what we mean about that. So where did the hack come from? It's, I think, an incredible opportunity with the way that the reorganization played out, because now we have the data centers, and we have DISA's different cloud initiatives, and those have been married together. And it puts us in a very different posture to get after the critical hosting and compute capabilities that the department needs. So for those of you that had known previously what the organization looked like, I was the director of the Cloud Computing Program Office, so that is a key component of the center. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Tony Purvis and what was ECO, what we're now calling the Office of Compute Operations, as well as the cloud portion of SE, and in particular, the MilCloud effort, BCAP, SCCA, and the like. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about, kind of solution agnostically getting after hosting and compute. The intent here is to lay down a global fabric that takes advantage of all the different ways that we can achieve that. So we're imagining this more like a continuum rather than a zero-sum game where it's either or. You're either on-prem, you're either in commercial cloud. I think that's a problem to think about it that way. And so for industry, I would offer to you that we are tackling this as a continuum and really want to drive and fill a void of commoditized capabilities that as a center we can offer to our mission partners that get in that hybrid space. because we're not going to move everything into commercial cloud. There are persistent requirements for certain applications to be in data centers. So you have this continuum, but it doesn't stop there. We need to be able to move into all classification levels. This is where I would say OCONUS, the data centers, will become extremely important to let us do that in the classified realm as springboards to getting data and doing the things that we need to do to empower the warfighter. The other piece of this is tactical edge. There's a space command now. Tactical edge is not just terrestrial, it's not just sea. Again, being able to unify and deliver hosting and compute that is both on-prem, that is commercial cloud, and all the different variants in between is very powerful and very critical, and our job is to deliver that. And so I'm sure some of you are familiar with the JWCC effort, right? That's the department's kind of multi-vendor approach to get after commercial cloud and really turn on the spigot to help our mission partners be able to adopt those capabilities quickly. And then we have the laydown of our data centers. That is a global presence. It is an incredible base and foundation for what we're going to be trying to do. Next slide, please. So I did want to show you the organizational structure just to give you a sense of where folks are, because I know a lot of you have pre-existing relationships with the number of people that are on our team. And so the other piece that I will kind of drive home with you is that we are approaching this in a cross-functional way. We are standing up product teams that really transcend organizational structure and cut across the different offices. So we have 3 main offices. The first is operations support. That's our business unit. For those of you that are especially interested in acquisition and everything that goes along with that, we're also thinking about that in a cross-functional way. So that team will be a blend of financial and budget and acquisition and contracting. I think we're going to do some interesting things out of there and continue to leverage some of the vehicles like OTAs, CRADAs. We have a couple of CRADAs in place and the like. The middle one there is compute operations. Again, what was known as ECO, that is led by Tony Purvis with Paul Crumblis as his deputy. You can see the lines of business is probably how many of you know those other boxes that are called out there, and the leadership that leads those different areas, right? Whether it's servers and implementation and the like. And then finally, the last one is the Office of Product Management. Les Benito is the acting chief for that office. That office, I think, especially reflects the blending of what were separate and distinct components that were kind of operating in parallel, not necessarily coordinated. So for those of you that have worked with John Hale, I'm sure you all know about our MilCloud, BCAP, and SCCA programs, but that's a key component of that office, as well as the technical security and user engagement talent that was housed within the Cloud Computing Program Office. So you see them as 3 offices here. You can see some of the names and where you may want to connect with folks as an entry point. But again, I would offer to you, Tony, Les, and I, we are partners in crime. You are not going to find us alone very much. So Tony knows where all the skeletons are hidden. He knows the environment in a way that I'm still getting up to speed on. And then I bring a lot of commercial cloud expertise to the table and a lot of agile methodologies, and we're really infusing that across the board. Can we please go to the next slide? So I wanted to highlight a few of the products, and we are saying products. We're really trying to move into the modern kind of private sector terminology. I mean, certainly these are programs that need to be managed. I know Jason very much wants us to manage these things appropriately as programs. But as we think about capabilities, we have product teams, and these are some of the products that we work on. And I'm actually going to go bottom up. So CVR, that was an effort that the former CCPO undertook, the delivery of 365 in less than 30 days in response to the global pandemic. We have Cloak, is another product team kind of prototyping and testing out different ways of using portable routers to bond communication streams, whether it's SATCOM, whether it's a Wi-Fi from a hotel or an Ethernet cable, and be able to use these capabilities OCONUS and maintain a level of obfuscation by kind of a back end into the commercial cloud. We just started a new product effort, and I do want to focus on this one especially. It's our web server container pilot. So one of the key pieces to our strategy is elevating the data centers and layering on some of the modern technology that industry has developed so that the data centers become key enablers of hybrid environments. And so right now, we are using OpenShift on-prem to pilot a web server and see what that's all about. We will achieve, I think, significant efficiencies, which will let us kind of reinvest our workforce into more complexity, going after different problems. But it is a team that cuts across our entire organization. It's led by folks in Tony's shop, but it is infused by some of the folks that worked in what was CCPO. I don't start something unless we can deliver it in less than 6 months. And so that's kind of rule one when we triage and look at what projects do we want to undertake. This product is well underway and will for sure deliver in less than 6 months. And so again, I would offer to industry that when you come to us and you offer us different ideas, I don't want to boil the ocean. We're not interested in doing that. We're interested in identifying kind of bite-sized things that, MVP, we can hit as a team in partnership in less than 6 months. And then go from there and use the momentum from those micro successes to really get after the bigger fundamental global challenge. Steve mentioned it, but infrastructure as code. Some of you may have seen Dave Lago present yesterday morning, I guess it was. This is actually really interesting from an acquisition standpoint because we had two CRADAs with two of the hyperscale cloud vendors, and we're expanding it beyond that. The point of this here is to let's remove some of the barriers and accelerate getting to cloud environments. So this gets at that utopia of push button, get banana. So when you deploy this and it's a 2-hour process, it stands up kind of your basic cloud environment. It layers on security policies, and it also the identity component as well. So VDMS and VDSS, all these things are kind of done in an automated way. And we have over 15 deployments at this point. Some of them are actually being used in production. And our experience is that those 2 hours, when you look at the average of how long our mission partners take to do just that component, it's roughly 6 to 7 months. So it's that kind of time savings, and on top of it, they're pre-accredited. So we have one pre-accreditation right now. We will be getting the second one in roughly the January timeframe. It's been really amazing working with Roger and his team to approach accreditation and the delivery of technology for the department in a different way. So as a mission partner, they inherit over 100 controls that have already been taken care of, and so there's a much smaller delta for the mission partner. I'll touch on just quickly sorry about that. MilCloud, my hand waver. MilCloud is also one of our products. Again, really looking at that spectrum of on-prem cloud, not just off-prem commercial cloud. JWCC, I will direct you to the public articles about that and just kind of move beyond. And then ADAT, just another instance of using modern technology, in this case to accelerate cloud provisioning. So next slide, I think that may be it. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Tony to go through some of the pieces from compute operations.
Thanks, Sharon. So welcome everyone, Tony Purvis, Chief of the Office of Compute Operations, formerly known as ECO, formerly known as the DEX, formerly known as Defense Mega Centers. So we've gone through many iterations over the past 25 or so years. So next slide. So when you talk about compute operations, it's really not just the day-to-day management of the applications on-prem. It's really a complete lifecycle management of everything that we do, both from a data center standpoint, an application standpoint, a server standpoint. So the different lines of business are responsible for that design, strategy, implementation, sustainment of the physical plants of the data centers, the mainframe environment, whether it be the System Z physical hardware, the operating system, the applications that run on there. And by the way, if you're a civilian or a military person in the entire department, all your payroll runs through those DISA mainframes. So those things stay up, people get paid. They go down, people don't get paid. So it is a real world mission that we're really supporting. Also the server environment, over 17,000 servers is what we host within our data centers, covering from a small base of AIX operating systems to many Linux operating systems, Windows operating systems, Solaris. We run the gamut of operating systems from a server standpoint. Over 1 exabyte of storage across those data centers, mainly running on HP storage arrays. We also do the application and database management support of all those applications that we host, over 850 of them on-prem that we're hosting within the data centers. I touched a little bit on the physical plan of the data centers, but we do operate 11 core data centers worldwide, 6 CONUS, 5 OCONUS, over 260,000 square feet of raised floor from the on-prem standpoint. And then also, to make all that communicate, we've got a communication line of business that is really responsible for that infrastructure, software-defined networking, the entire switches, routers that support all of those applications. I touched on 5 of the lines of business. The other 4 really are the more supporting lines of business that really make everything run. My cyber services line of business really touches on the audit functions to making sure that we're secure. Works a lot with Roger Greenwell's office from an RME standpoint to make sure that everything we do is secure and maintained from an RMF standpoint. My special services line of business is really that line of business that historically has done a lot of the enterprise services. We've just picked up the DoD 365J environment off-prem. They're also going to be doing a lot more off-prem activities. So like Sharon said, really we're breaking that mold of on-prem versus off-prem, cloud versus traditional data centers, and we manage things regardless of where they sit. And we're doing that today. So then I get into my implementation line of business, and that's the line of business that's the front door for any new workloads, any new applications, anything that we're bringing new in either on-prem or off-prem. They're really project managers that really understand the IT environment that help us bring everything in. Not to forget the bottom left corner, we just stood up a new office that supports the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. It's really supporting them well in what they're doing in their 2 data centers sitting in Pennsylvania and down in Georgia. Next slide. So I've got 14 opportunities that I'm going to go through. At our program booth upstairs, I've got some of the key line of business managers, and my deputy, Paul Crumbus, will be there throughout the day to dig into any questions you have on these or any other lines of or any other opportunities that we have or our existing contracts. So The first three really get into our capacity services contracts. Jason Martin mentioned that earlier. We've been doing capacity services contracts for 20 plus years now. So we really understand them. Different vendors bid on them differently. We're really looking for that innovation. We're really looking for that automation. So with these three that are coming up, the System P, which is the AIX operating system, the Spark, which is the Solaris operating system, and then the x86, which runs the gamut of VMware, x80, or Windows, or one of our Linux flavors. So those three you see when they're about to be awarded. These are 10-year contracts. We always like to award the next generation of these contracts before we get into the option years, because they are 5-year base, 5-year, 1-year options. It gives vendors and us time to change out technologies and to do it in a very methodical way so we don't disrupt the warfighter's applications. Next slide. These three opportunities cover our software environment. The first one is our BMC suite of software from a Control-M, which is a scheduling software, and then our MainView software products, which run on our mainframe environment. Our Veritas solution today is our entire server backup solution. So it backs up that exabyte of data. That's going to get released in the third quarter of this FY. And then the last one I'll touch on a little bit, even though it's a sole source, really excited in this area. This was our first capacity services contract that we awarded back in 2001. And what we've done over the past several months, working with the former Unisys people, now SEIC, is we've really moved those set of applications off of the Unisys ClearPath hardware over to a virtualized x86 environment running under VMware. So we've really moved off of some ClearPath technology over to our traditional HP storage arrays, HPE x86 chipsets, really reduced the cost of the department by over $4 million by moving to more traditional hardware. Really excited the production environment for that's going to be moved over in November of this year. So next month. Next slide. So the next 7 opportunities cover more of our services-based contracts. I'll go through those pretty quickly. Like I mentioned, I've got the LOBs upstairs that can really dig into these and go into more detail. But the mainframe line of business, we've really, I guess 2 years ago, maybe 3, we morphed from 77 different service-based contracts down to 23. So we really went through a major contract consolidation on our services area to make sure that we got the best bang for the buck. And what we did is every line of business, to not put all their eggs in one basket, they really divided things up into an east side and a west side, and those have different pops on them. So to make sure that as we transition one contract to another contract, we don't lose an entire support model. So within the mainframe area, this is really our systems programmers, the people that manage the storage arrays, the people that manage the applications that run on the mainframe. In our server environment, it also has an east and a west. This is the east one. This one is actually on the street right now. We're actually reviewing proposals. It was actually released fourth quarter of FY21. Next slide. So in our cyber area, this opportunity covers a lot of our cyber automation. You'll hear about that a lot, both from the previous 2 days and from our booth. We're really focused on automation. We're really focused on innovation. How do we take the things that we do on a day-to-day IT standpoint and figure out ways to automate those processes? Take the person out of it and let the software do things more efficiently. So the next one down, I touched on implementation. This is really our program managers that bring in new workload. They really are IT people. We need people to understand the customer's requirements and be able to understand how they would go into our environment and really communicate across the lines of business from an IT standpoint with the system admins, with the database people, to make sure that we understand everything that's going on. Within the sustainment line of business, this one contract is really more on the database side, application support side. It's really someone that understands the Oracle, the SQL databases, as well as how Control-M is done, scheduling is done within the server environment. Next slide. So in our communication area, this is 2 of our 3 opportunities from a communication line of business standpoint. The first one is a pretty big offering. It's going to be, in fact, I think it's on the street right now with proposals due back, I think the 12th of November. So if you aren't tracking this, you've got a little bit of time to really read up on it, but it really is how we manage and engineer our infrastructure communications environment. I mentioned a little bit earlier about software-defined networking, but really what is the new thing? How do we integrate this with Thunderdome down the road? This is really what we're looking at these services to focus a lot on. And then, like I mentioned, 7x24 operations, that's the heart of what we do to make sure that these 850 applications that we support always stay up. And from a communication standpoint, we've got 7x24 people that are on shift, on site all the time, making sure that our communications infrastructure is always operational. Next slide. The last opportunity I'll talk about, it was under, Sharon mentioned how the new HAC Center is a combination of things. This opportunity actually is an opportunity that belongs to Caroline Bean in the SD Directorate. So when I think Mr. Martin gets up, I took this one on because it used to belong to us, but it's the enterprise messaging opportunity, and it really is moving this application from version 4 to version 5 and really trying to introduce an active model to it. So if you're interested in this one, I would ask you to talk to either Caroline Bean or someone out of the Services Development Office. And I think that's the last one. So
Okay.
are there any questions?
Yes, sir. Our first question, how do you envision the evolving organization of the constituent pieces of HAC? Will there be a leader over each piece like MilCloud, Commercial Cloud, and DECCs?
Sure. So I think there's two dimensions to that. One is the organizational structure, and that was the slide that we showed before. So, ECO is, continues to be the unit that it was. Again, now we're calling that compute operations. The product management, the folks within that were working on MilCloud and working on JWCC, those things are contained together. And then the last one on operations support, which is essentially our business unit. And we're really thinking about it in that way, business. So that is what I'll just call the chain of command organizationally. But when it comes to the way that we're really driving things forward, it's a product team mentality using agile methodologies. So, and those people that are the product owners, that are the leads for each of those product teams, we follow the 2 pizza rule, and they may come from a variety of places in the organization, and they may not be part of the supervisory leadership chain of command. And so, like I said, we have the on-prem container project that's being led out of Tony's shop. Within product management, under Les Benito, there's a number of product teams, whether you're talking BCAP, whether you're talking MilCloud 2, whether you're talking JWCC. So I think there's more fluidity to the way the center is going to be managed than perhaps there was historically. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Will HAC be responsible for CAP equivalency? What will your responsibilities be regarding the CAP versus Mr. Greenwell?
So CAP, hopefully they mean CAP in terms of,
Access point?
I'm sorry?
Cloud access point?
Yeah, I assume that's CAP. In terms of working with Roger, we like to keep him on his toes. But assuming that the BCAPs, the boundary caps, are cloud access points are what you are intending, I would say every area, and really this goes to some degree the zero-based review or day at the spa, everyone is looking at how do we drive modernization, how do we think about tomorrow, not now, not just now in terms of technology delivery. The BCAPs are definitely being looked at to say, hey, is there a way of doing this better? Can we make it more around high-speed transport? And where does the security stack, where does it make sense for that to sit? And there's a lot of elements to security right now, and certainly Thunderdome is one of those. So I don't necessarily have all the specifics in detail if that's what the question is going after. I would just offer to you that really the entire agency is getting introspective and looking at itself to see where we can push harder and further and where we might modernize.
And a little bit on that, I think that as we have stood up these 4 centers, they're definitely not siloed. You heard Don Means talk a little bit earlier about operations. His operations group directly interfaces with my command and control group that, from a day-to-day incident management standpoint. Under Roger Greenwell, we've got Raj Shaw that's responsible for automation. So my automation people work with his automation people. From under Jason Martin, they're the program office for DIOS and DoD 365J. We do the day-to-day management of that. So really, it's a complete integration across all 4 centers, probably more so than we've ever done in the past.
100%.
What will the strategic glue across these compute fabrics be?
That's a great question and one that we are trying to answer ourselves right now. So be patient with us. We are very young. We were born October 1st. But we have teams right now. We've broken out to some different IPTs. We're putting a lot of thought around the vision is empower the warfighter to execute at the speed of mission. Okay, well, how do you do that? How does compute and hosting fit into that? So we are looking at developing our own strategic plan that nests within General Skinner's strategic plan, and hopefully that will convey to industry more around strategically how we're thinking about it. And it is strategic. It's not this product or that product. It is a strategic look that we can then really use that as a basis to have a conversation with industry. One of the things that will also be a key part of that, and again, it goes to that product ownership mentality, product team mentality, is what are the priorities? Because frankly, there's an infinite demand on what we could do with hosting and compute to support the mission of national defense. We need to really think hard on what are we doing right now and why are we doing it, and is that really the most important thing? And again, the answers that we start kind of converging on is something that we fully intend to communicate with industry. We really, really need your help to help us figure out how we can very quickly deploy different capabilities that are sustainable and scalable. And I think Don mentioned that before. If it doesn't scale, we're really not doing our job as a combat support agency for the entire department.
The Intel community is planning an integration contract, CIMM, for its multi-cloud program. Is JWCC planning something similar? What are plans for migration services, application rationalization, integration, and optimization services, professional services, etc.?
Sounds like DoD CIO should have its own industry day. No, it's a really great question. I'll just touch on it maybe gently because there's so much complexity to that. And I do think that's one of the differentiators. I mean, the department is many times over larger than the intelligence community, and there's enormous complexity in what we do. And the focus of our mission is of course, right, hyper operational. And so the way we need technology to work for us and the people that were working with us to help enable us to get after it is just different. But we do need a lot of support. I have no doubt our mission partners need help, whether it's from a kind of a contracting support perspective, an integration perspective. And I think that a lot of those opportunities are going to be tailored to the different components across the organization. So we're watching what the IC is doing very closely to see how that plays out, to see if there's some piece of that makes sense for us. But I think right now we're hyper-focused on getting those directed contracts in place with the hyperscale cloud vendors and then move from there.
Can you discuss DISA's current strategy and priorities around cloud computing and offering services to military services and agencies? How has your thinking evolved over the past few years, particularly post-Jedi?
It's important. So I think again, that's another one of those. I'll touch on it gently because I think General Skinner should be the one driving forward the messaging around the holistic strategy for the agency. So I'll go back to what I said before and make it more vision and mission focused in terms of approaching the question. So hosting and compute has to operate as a foundation for everything else and being that jumping off point. And that includes things like JADC2, it includes things like the different data accelerator efforts. If that is not placed, the different solutions that each of these other teams are tackling, which are so critical if we're going to keep winning this. It's a really big deal. And as a center, we're taking that very seriously because if we don't show up and do what we're promising, it's going to be very hard for those other efforts to scale, to work when communications are disrupted or just non-existent or intermittent, right? That tactical edge DDoS environment. If we need failback and resiliency and all the dimensions, whether it's kind of data center, cloud, and everything in between. So in terms of the strategic plan at that higher level and how we're thinking about cloud and cloud computing, at risk of repeating myself, I would just say it's a holistic look for us. It is about a global fabric. It is getting after the different means by which you can deliver hosting and compute. And so we really need industry to not think about this as a pigeonhole for each of these different things. We really need you to help us understand how your technology helps plug into this holistic strategy so that it's unified rather than disparate.
It looks like the majority of your acquisition ops are full and open with no SBs set aside. Is that truly your intent?
I'll defer this to Mr. Packard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are full and open. We do go through the small business office, through DITCO on all acquisition strategies. So I would really ask you to look as we release those acquisitions and those opportunities, and that strategy may change, especially as we're 2 years away or 18 months away. So I wouldn't get too focused on exactly what they said. Now on the software side, of course, those are brand name specific, but on the services side, those strategies are still being developed. So.
Yeah. And I would say on the cloud product side, and I just push aside JWCC, CCPO historically has a history of working with small business. It's something that is important. So I would just encourage small business to step forward, help us understand where you think you can plug in. It's about speed and small iteration, understanding that it needs to be scalable. So we're definitely have a history of working with small businesses and want to continue doing that.
When will the JWCC RFQ or RFI be published, and when is the anticipated award?
So I think Dr. Fletcher mentioned it yesterday in her keynote. We are expecting delivery of services to happen under JWCC in the summer of 2022 timeframe. Those are direct solicitations, so they are going directly to the hyperscale cloud vendors, and we're just working through that process now.
How will the Global Directory product fit into the identity programs consolidated into the cyber services portfolio? What does that interaction look like?
So I think that's better for Jason Martin and his team to answer the specifics of that. I think Steve put it nicely of there's been different efforts and that is moving out in a unified enterprise ICAM way. And so if you want to learn more about that, I would encourage you to reach out to Brian Herman and Jason Martin.
And our final question. Your descriptions of how Hack intends on executing with agility, speed, and MVPs sounds like overlap with the Emerging Technology Directorate's methodology. How does Hack and EM intend on operating together with such similarities?
Sure. I mean, speed is obviously a key focus of General Skinner, velocity of action to win, and agile methodologies. It is just a methodology of going after that. Historically, CCPO has had a super close relationship with Steve. We will continue to do so. I think it's unification of efforts, just like Tony said. There's a lot of integration across the centers right now. So that is not in competition. We definitely are not in competition with Steve. We are amplifiers for each other. For years, we've worked together really closely. And 22 seconds, and now I think you get to go to lunch. That's what it says here, 22 seconds. So
Thank
we
you,
did
Ms. Woods. Please give a round of applause for our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, personnel from many of DISA's program offices are available until 3 p.m. in the Howard Street lobby. At this time, we will break for lunch. We will begin the next session promptly at 12:15. Enjoy your lunch, and please be in your seats at 12:15 for Jason Martin's presentation.